this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Why have we asked our contractor we found on Angie.com to be our kids' legal guardian? Because he took such good care when redoing our basement that we knew we could trust him to care for our kids, all 8 of them, should something happen to us.
Are you my dad now?
No, sorry, I do basements. Connecting homeowners with skilled pros for over 30 years. Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time, 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Support for The Middle comes from the stations that air the show and from you. Thanks for making a donation at listentothemiddle.com.
Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ, Tolliver. And Tolliver, we have a very special guest this hour. The one and only astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson is with us to talk about the very important role the U.S. government plays in science. But I'm sure that some of our listeners are going to want to ask him about stuff like how fast the Earth spins. Mm-hmm. So you can stockpile those questions for the end of the hour, Tolliver. We're going to try to stay on topic before that.
And listen, we're taking questions from all over the galaxy, okay?
That's right.
Get them in quick. There's a line.
The farther away, the better. It turns out the United States government is the largest funder of scientific research on Earth, has been for decades, and much of it goes out through grants to universities. Most scientific studies at universities are funded at least in part, directly or indirectly, by the federal government, maybe the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health. But since President Trump returned to the White House, he has been slashing scientific research funding and has proposed cuts of more than 50% at the National Science Foundation for next year, 40% at the NIH, almost 25% at NASA. Harvard's President Alan Garber says America's scientific edge is at risk.
Why cut off research funding? Sure, it hurts Harvard, but it hurts the country because, after all, research funding is given to carry out work that the federal government designates as high priority work.
President Trump has also placed noted skeptics of established science in positions of power, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who now leads the Department of Health and Human Services, and recently claimed that Tylenol during pregnancy causes autism, and then claimed a link between circumcisions and autism.
Yeah.
There's many other confirmation studies. There's 2 studies that show children who are circumcised early have double the rate of autism. And it's highly likely because they're given Tylenol. So, none of this is positive, but all of it is stuff that we should be paying attention to.
Now, that's not what we're talking about this hour, but do you trust him when he says that? So all of this, questions of trust in science, which took a hit after the pandemic, and funding of science brings us to our question this hour. What should the government's role be in science? Tolliver, the number, please.
You can call us at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com or comment on our live stream on YouTube. I'm checking them all, so get your messages in, por favor.
And we are thrilled to be joined this hour by Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist and author of the just about to be released book, Just Visiting This Planet, revised and updated for the 21st century. Neil deGrasse Tyson, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I very much embrace the concept and mission of your show. So
well, we appreciate that.
Keep it strong.
Thank you so much. And let's start with the cuts. The cuts to research have already been very big. They're likely to get bigger next year if Trump gets his way with the budget. What is at stake for ordinary Americans who are listening right now if there are big cuts to scientific research in the U.S.?
Well, the scientific research that's getting cut is of the kind that cannot, or rather would not, be done by corporations. Corporations have R&D, sure, but that R&D has a very tight connection to what might show up on their quarterly report or their annual report. If not this year, then next year or the year after. When you fund fundamental science, especially at the university level, the return on that investment is many, many years in the future, 5, possibly 10 or more. And so when the government supports that level of research, it is looking out for its long-term interest, not only as a scientific leader of the world. Maybe you don't care about whether you lead in science, okay, but I know everyone cares about our economic health. And investments in science and technology, especially science at the foundational level, are the engines of tomorrow's economy. So it's basically knocking out the future economic health of the country at its kneecaps. And you won't see that for a few more years is the problem.
Well, and how did the government become so dominant in funding scientific research? And should it be that way?
Well, I will never say what should or shouldn't be. We're a democracy, or at least a republic. People vote for who they want in office. So as an educator, my task, I see, is to educate and enlighten the electorate so that when they do vote, they make an informed decision about their present and future of their governance. So I'm not going to ever say what should or should. I'm not going to tell you to fund NASA. If you don't want to fund NASA, don't fund NASA. But I will tell you the consequences of not funding it, and then you make the decision. So these cuts are what I foresee is, holding aside the fact that I have colleagues, for example, who've gotten phone calls from Europe saying, we understand you just lost your funding. We'll create a lab for you over here. We'll fund it. And so this is the beginning of what could be a rather devastating brain drain on the American scientific elite. And by the way, maybe what goes around comes around, because we spent decades attracting the brightest people from all the other countries of the world.
Right.
When I was in graduate school many moons ago, half of my graduating class were foreign nationals. And because people came here because, as you correctly noted, we were leaders in science. As that fades, and as other countries rise up, especially China, take a look at the growth of China's economy just in the last 15 years, what they have done to secure that, and what their investments are to ensure that they maintain it. Point is that this began basically after the Second World War. There was a report to President Truman from Vannevar Bush. I don't know if he's related to the Bushes that came later, but he was basically the United States' first science advisor. And he wrote an extraordinary document. I can't overstate its importance and value. It should be in the National Archives next to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, because it is so fundamental to what we became as a nation in the second half of the 20th century. And it's called Science, the Endless Frontier. You can look it up online. Science, the Endless Frontier. You just look at line by line. And it says science in the interest of our health. Science as an engine for to grow the economy. Science to vaccines to keep us healthy. And security. Science in the role of security. And it deeply understood that value. To the extent that the electorate does not, we will recede on the world stage. It's not a cliff that you walk over and fall down. It's this sort of slope. the Europe.
Well, I just read, by the way, that China's spending on scientific research and development is set to outpace the United States by 2027 at the current rate.
Yeah, I'm surprised that hasn't already happened. And 2027 is not far into the future. So again, is it a spending race? I don't want to have to think about it that way. Who spends the most money wins. It's in the end, it's innovation. So I want to keep it broader than just who's spending the most money, although that is the most blunt measure of all of this, of course. So that's the starter measure. So I'm concerned about the future of the United States. We will just have to dance to the tune set by other countries. But many people alive today, that's not what they're accustomed to. They're accustomed to other people knocking on our doors saying, oh, guy, we're looking over our fence. What are you guys up to now? Can we have some of that too?
Well, and Trump has explained these cuts by saying that things so far in terms of federal government funding of scientific research haven't been transparent. He cites, for example, that teachers' unions had an effect on masking guidance during the pandemic rather than it being a purely scientific recommendation. A lot of what we're talking about here and the politics of it has to do with COVID and how many Americans reacted to scientific guidance during that. What do you say to that? Would the scientific community have done anything differently knowing now what the reaction has been?
Well, those are two separable variables. We can all complain about how COVID was handled by the government and mask or no mask or wash the surfaces or not. And I can comment on that if you'd like. In fact, I'm executive producer on a documentary called Shot in the Arm, who's the principal director, executive producer on that is Scott Hamilton Kennedy. I think it's available on PBS channels online if you can dig for it. But in there, it's actually a sensitive look at people who were duped to becoming vaccine hesitant. And it's a very sincere and honest look at that whole world and how that unfolded and what one would need to do about it so that it doesn't happen again. So that's a separable variable from cutting NASA science by 50% or cutting, the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation was founded based on the recommendations from the Endless Frontier document. And I forgot, 1946, 1947. And so it is that engine of funding, knowing that universities are the place where that would happen. You can't get corporations to do research that'll pay dividends in 10 years. That's not going to happen. And if the federal government doesn't do it, nobody will do it. And you can't expect to invent the future just on how clever your tech bros are in their R&D departments, okay? They will get you only so far. Only so far. Do you realize the entire IT sector thrives? No, it doesn't thrive. It exists because of their ability to exploit the quantum physics. We're in the centennial decade of the discovery of quantum physics, discovered by physicists who had no idea it would one day be the foundation of the creation, storage, and retrieval of digital information.
It's the basic science that the federal government funds. Tolliver, we talked about vaccine hesitancy. The backlash to the medical establishment and the COVID vaccine has spread to other vaccines now in some places.
Yeah, take Florida, for example, whose Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo recently announced that the state is working to end all vaccine mandates.
The Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery.
Tolliver, your thoughts?
Oh, man. I'm dumbfounded. I got to be honest.
You don't have to
rare
say
that this
thoughts.
happens.
Yeah, right, exactly. We'll be right back with your calls for Neil deGrasse Tyson coming up on The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy. with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Why have I asked my electrician I found on Angie.com to bury my pet hamster Nibbles in our yard for me? Because I was so moved by how carefully he buried my electrical wires, I knew I could trust him to bury my sweet Nibbles after his untimely end. Nibbles, gone too soon. May he scurry in peace.
Hey, sorry about your pet, but I just wire stuff.
Nibbles would have loved you like a brother.
Connecting homeowners with skilled pros for over 30 years. Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
How do you make chicken nuggets like 7,000% better? Short answer, you let Taco Bell make them. Long answer, start with all white meat chicken nuggets, bread them in crunchy tortilla chips, and serve them with Hidden Valley Diablo Ranch. Yep, that's Hidden Valley Ranch mixed with Taco Bell Diablo sauce. It's exactly what it sounds like, and somehow even better. Simple math, spicy results. Crispy chicken nuggets from Taco Bell. A brand new classic. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations for a limited time only, while supplies last.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking you, what should the government's role be in science? Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media. And I got to tell you, they're coming in fast and hot. So get yours in. I'll get you on the air.
And we're joined by astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, and there are some callers waiting to talk to you, Neil. But just before we do that, I want to ask you, it's not just the COVID vaccines that there have been trust issues with. There's also artificial intelligence, green energy, genetically modified foods. Is there anything different about some level of mistrust in kind of new technologies and new scientific advancements now than at points in the past in human history when there was always kind of a level of distrust of the new?
Yeah, I don't have a silver bullet answer for that. What I do know that is online, if you post a video that says the experts are wrong and they're withholding this information from you, I have the actual answer and here it is. That's clickbait. So the revenue model for producing content online thrives on conflict. And if everybody just agreed, people would be making less money because people are less aggravated, they're less angered, they're less motivated to keep clicking on things that make them angry. So that could be a factor here. About AI, sure, we would need some guardrails, but AI has been around for quite a while. It's been in the scientific field, certainly in the physical sciences, for quite some time. It only achieved great visibility when it could write your term paper and could do your art project. But prior to that, it's with us to stay. So to say AI as though it's the thing that has to be controlled, at some point we need more nuanced vocabulary about the ways in which AI is touching our lives and decide when and where any guardrails are necessary and how to establish them. But to say we got to stop all AI, then we can't analyze the data from the telescope that's producing the largest quantity of data of any telescope we've ever had, which just came online. It's called the Vera Rubin telescope. It's taking movies of the night sky to watch for asteroids that could be hazardous to us. That data is fully analyzed, processed, redoubled if something interesting is found. All that's by AI. So I'm not going to say stop AI. Let's have a more nuanced conversation about that.
Let's go to Dan, who's in Kansas City, Missouri. Dan, go ahead for Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Good evening. I am totally in favor of a very robust government funding structure through government institutions and universities for funding science and research, especially if it's in the national interest, hard sciences with real-world applications. It needs to be efficient because we have seen, every time they're going through the budget, there's these studies that are just laughably absurd. And the people really want to trust. We need to be able to trust our public officials and credentialed scientists in universities as well. But we have to admit that there's been a lot of failures as well, like the food pyramid that told us we should eat 6 servings of Wonder Bread a day, all of the drugs that have been approved and then had to be recalled because they're dangerous. You still see ads to this day, and many of the regulators, that go back and forth between the government working for the pharmaceutical industries. There's been a lot of climate change predictions that have come and went and didn't happen. Race is a social construct. It's like, well, you want to call it population groups, that's fine. Let's just say, semantic thing.
I think you've given a lot of examples there. We get your point, Dan. Let me ask Neil deGrasse Tyson. What do you think about that? How do you respond to Dan? In all the funding that goes out there, there are some things that a President Trump or whoever could point to and say this is a ridiculous waste of money.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can if you choose, but because science on the frontier history has shown will have applications that are not entirely obvious at the time the research is occurring. You can't say that I'll only fund this if it can serve national interest. You do not know that at the time the research is being conducted. That's the example I gave with the research into quantum physics. At a time, no one is thinking about molecules or atoms or nuclei, and an entire branch of physics unfolds. Funded, but much of that was done by universities, but it unfolds and has applications 50 years later. Okay, you cannot pass that judgment if the project is exploring something on a frontier that's not previously known or understood. That's the whole point of pure science. To sit around and say, well, will that put food on my plate? What's the relevance of that? My physics professor in college, who studied nuclei in gas clouds across the galaxy, you can say, how does that relate to anything? He discovered a phenomenon in the nucleus of atoms called nuclear magnetic resonance that would later be turned into a magnetic resonance imager.
MRI.
The MRI, arguably the most potent tool in the arsenal of the medical community without cutting you open first. And so you can't pass that judgment, okay? So that's my first point. Second, science needs to be taught not as a satchel of information that is unerring and unmovable. It needs to be taught as a means of querying nature. And how do you answer those queries that you pose upon nature? You conduct research that then gets verified by others, okay? And when it gets verified multiple times, ideally by a competitor, then it becomes objective truths about how the world works. And then you move on to the next problem. So to say the scientists set a food pyramid and then what should have happened there is they needed to say, is this food pyramid that we're about to propose verified by other studies? Okay. And if it is, but they still want to get it out there, that's okay. Otherwise, nothing would ever get released. And so, but you have to understand that it could vary. It could be adjusted. That's the moving frontier of science. And with a novel virus, the coronavirus, a novel virus, there wasn't much data on it. When you have something with not much data, what do you go on? So what they should have done was say, here's this week's update on how we think you should react to this virus. Stay tuned because research is coming in weekly. And we will update that. And that way, you're not running around saying, we're wrong. Why should I ever believe anything you say? That's the wrong way to think about the moving frontier.
Well, and by the way, right now, even the Trump administration is saying one of the things they want to do is release drugs faster from the FDA because maybe it will help the person who has cancer right now and wants to take the trial drug, even if it hasn't gone through the full process yet. Cynthia is calling from Sartell, Minnesota. Cynthia, go ahead with your thoughts.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the show. It's a wonderful format. I wanted to respond to the comment on brain drain. It's not just all people who already hold doctorates. I'm a molecular biologist. I would not have received my training, contributed to CAR T development and other cancer treatments if I had not received funding from the government to allow me to do that work. The academic labs cannot survive in the current model without government funding. So you have the double attack on the Department of Education, NSF, NIH. I personally had a DOD fellowship, so I'm concerned at both ends. If you want to do science, you may have to leave, but if you want to do science, you might never get the opportunity.
Yeah, Cynthia, thank you for that. For that call.
Thanks for that.
Neil, go
the
ahead.
firsthand view on what's going on here. Yeah.
Yeah. Brett is calling from Teutonia, Idaho. Brett, go ahead with your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts were just that, and it's for Dr. Tyson, is that in this time of partisanship, and the question that I heard posed was about the federal government, but would this not be maybe a time where we ask that the federal government isn't who is participating in this, and would that we try to get the private sector to help advance science more, because the partisanship involved in politics these days, nothing gets done. What goes forward gets reversed. What goes forward gets reversed.
So the partisanship is odd because science had not historically been partisan. Consider, I have a whole series of posts to social media between March and May. Between March and the end of May, that explored the fact that Republican leadership in the 20th century was responsible for huge increases in the science budget. So this is highly unusual for these reductions in science funding to come out under Republican leadership. And I tried to give these as examples and not even make it partisan in the sense that, well, Democrats did this, you should do. No, I said your own party have supported science mightily in the past. I tried to make that case. I don't know who looked or who paid attention to it. The private sector, private sector, when they're investors in a capitalist system where there's shareholders, where there's a return on investment that is expected or even required in the decisions they make, they're not going to get a return on the investment for 5 or 10 years. We'd have to remodel what a corporate structure looks like to have a time horizon that is not the quarterly report or the annual report. And I don't see that forthcoming right now. And by the way, when the federal government makes these investments, it pays dividends later because whole industries get built. People get hired into those industries and they pay taxes. So that's what keeps the government healthy. And the growth of our GDP per capita over the decades, oh my gosh, just plot it. And that doesn't come from nothing. And it doesn't come just from companies that are making more money than have ever been made before. It comes from foundational research. In a way, it's behind the curtain. You don't see that because it's happening in universities, and they don't have PR campaigns. They don't have TV ads. They don't have, the CEO making speeches about the fundamental research. That just doesn't happen. So I worry the fact that it's this hidden, yet so fundamental that the public thinks it's not relevant, and we can get rid of it and save money for having done so.
Tolliver, what is coming in online on social media and at listentothemiddle.com?
Yeah, I'll get a few of these in. Mickey says, I can't begin to imagine the conversation between the staff at NIH and patients chosen for clinical trials, finding out it has been shut down. Lucy in Grand Rapids says, because of my parents' religion, I wasn't vaccinated and I had measles at 27. It was the sickest I've ever been in my life. I love science, which I thought was an optimistic thing to that. And then Colin in Boise says, scientific research represents the greatest of our species coming together and sharing the best part of our humanity. Star Trek isn't just a fantasy. We've only seen the barest of our vast potential as a species. Look
Great.
at that. Optimism.
Yes, optimism is good.
The lines are fully lit up, so let me get to another caller here. Sarah
Please.
is in Houston, Texas. Hi, Sarah. Go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to talk about this from a perspective of women's health and people feeling trust in science vis-a-vis their doctors. Because I had a pretty rare condition called hypothalamic amenorrhea. I had to go to multiple doctors who I think a lot of people, again, that's their interaction with science in a lot of cases, right, as the medical science that's being done. And I had an experience that kind of undermined my own trust, not in science itself, because it was reading medical articles from experts on this condition that helped me understand what was impacting me. But I would be sitting with my doctor, and more than one doctor made statements that I knew were demonstrably false, right? Because I'd read the studies. I knew what was actually out there. And I think there's this tension sometimes that maybe has led to a loss of trust with public health officials or doctors. They are thinking about the population more as an aggregate, right? They're thinking about kind of the average person and what kind of care that they need. And I know why they're doing that, because doctors have so little time, they need more resources. But I think that once someone's had that experience, even though, again, it was science that helped me find the answer to the problem, which is no longer affecting me, it did hurt my trust. And it did make me question sometimes, okay, is this scientist or doctor, are they dumbing this down because they think that I don't have the capacity to understand this problem? And again, my issue was resolved, but it was only because I took things into my own hands. So I feel this tension where it was the scientific journals I read that I was able to access that let me solve the problem. And yet I have this skepticism now that I can't fully trust what's being told to me by a scientific communicator unless I do extensive research myself. Yeah.
Did you call this article to the attention of your doctor?
You know, at the time I doubted myself too much, and it wasn't the kind of relationship I had with my doctor where I felt that he wanted to, like, I tried to push back a little bit and I was kind of shut down.
Yeah, the medical profession is notorious, at least historically, for just, keeping their own lexicon among themselves and not just dumbing it down to you, but say, just do what I say because I know what I'm doing and you don't. So there was a lot of that. I'd like to think that there's a generation of doctors that don't suffer from that distance that they put themselves to their patients. But so you are a case where you found a solution. The question is, how many people who maybe did the same thing you did, and believed they knew more than their doctor, but they didn't, yet still pulled away from their doctor? And so the testimonies that we hear are from people where it has worked for them. Where it has not worked, or rather, where the doctor's advice was the right advice, is surely the overwhelming majority of all cases. And so at what point do you say, my case makes me doubt all doctors, or my case makes me doubt this person who is getting paid to be a doctor in front of me? I guess that's the point. That's the crux here. There's the individual case, and there's whether you're now going to not trust anything in your whole life. And that would be tragic if that were a consequence of this one unfortunate incident.
I'm going to do something I shouldn't do, which is I'm going to try to just sneak in one quick thought from a caller, John, with very little time. John in Tallahassee, Florida. Go ahead very quickly.
Okay. The current administration has been concerned about imbalance of trade, but the U.S. has had a huge intellectual imbalance in the opposite direction for decades, where many of the world's smartest, hardest-working scientists and new graduate students have come into the United States. Almost none have left. And that is up until recently. Our economy has been heavily tech-based, but with this shutting down of research, charging $100,000 a year for an H-1B visa, which is for the highly skilled workers, it's shutting off this flow of some of the world's best talent to charge the U.S. economy. And now there's even some flux going out of the United States where they're seeking better opportunities.
So you've got a trade deficit, but a scientist surplus. We've got to just pause right there, because Tolliver, we've been talking about some of the great inventions that have come out of scientific research. GPS is one of them. Listen here to this old KGAN Cedar Rapids news clip from 1987 about the early adoption of GPS.
It's called the Global Positioning System, or GPS. By using satellites and this receiver system, the military and private users will be able to know more precisely where they are. Air Force Colonel Gaylord Green, who was in Coralville today to accept the first unit, says it will be very helpful for nighttime military maneuvers and in situations where position is simply difficult to determine.
The military, when they had recent deployment to Egypt, the maps didn't help them very much.
I have to say, I have a terrible sense of direction, and therefore I need GPS all the time, whether I'm in the Sahara Desert or just in a grid street situation.
When are you in the Sahara Desert?
I mean, I'm not, but he was mentioning the Sahara Desert. Anyway, we'll be back with more of your calls in a minute on The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Why have I asked my HVAC guy I found on Angie.com to change my grandpa's trachea tube? Because I was so amazed by how quickly he replaced our air ducts. I knew I could trust him to change Pop-Pop's tube while I was on vacation.
Make it quick, young man.
Aw, see? Pop-Pop trusts you.
I think we should call a doctor.
Connecting homeowners with skilled pros for over 30 years. Angie, the one you trust to find the ones you trust. Find pros for all your home projects at Angie.com.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking you, what should the government's role be in science? You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out at listentothemiddle.com. I'm joined by astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. And in the final segment of the show here, later on, if you have just crazy questions about science for Neil deGrasse Tyson, you may now commence those calls. Let's go right back to Josh in Columbia, South Carolina. Josh, go ahead for Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. What an honor to speak to both of you gentlemen. I just was wanting to make a comment regarding what Dr. Tyson talked about earlier with research being something that we don't necessarily know in the time now of the value that we may have later on. My wife is a ceramicist. She does pottery and art, and she's made this point to me regarding art the same way, where you don't understand the value of it until it's there. Until you actually have it there and you can appreciate it. And I think that's something that our country is kind of missing as well. and it's I've never seen the linkage between science and art, but that's something that really kind of sparked my imagination. The other point I was going to make was the communication to the common man. I think is one thing that we've disenfranchised a lot of our people here in this country, and in order for them to have understanding. And I'd like to hear what Dr. Tyson has to say about that, or if he has any thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, a first comment about art. So much of great art in the country and even in the world has been sort of publicly supported. All right. Generally, the opera house in your hometown or the symphony is not entirely funded by ticket sales. And so there's typically some kind of resources that come from a tax base to support it, because a county, a region, a state values the role of art in a cultured society. Another way to say that, however, is you can imagine a country that had no art in it. You can build such a country, and it could have a booming economy because it's tech driven and it's farming or whatever, or the big financial sectors. But is that a country you'd want to live in? That's what you have to ask yourself. And the art is what enables us to celebrate what it is to be human. The creativity through the lens of an artist is something that we have valued throughout time. When people go to Europe, they don't just look at the mountains, they go to the art museums, right? That's the huge tourist attraction when people go to France or London or any place where that has been a cultural history in their nation. So art should be fully defensible on its own right if you just pause and think about it. Now, with regard to people, I think I understood the second half of the question. I
About
think
communication to the common man of science, maybe that it's hard for some people to understand it.
Yeah. So in science, to get a PhD in science, you are not trained to communicate with anybody other than colleagues in the language of your field. So that's a problem. That's a real problem, especially since shucksters who are out there have a charisma that scientists generally don't have. And so we're trying to offer the science, and people who are charlatans or peddlers of anti-science sentiment, they have huge platforms and they're charismatic and they're saying the scientists are telling you this, but I have the truth. Again, that's huge clickbait. So it's a problem. Yes.
They have a
in my field,
in
I have
podcasting.
the legacy of Carl Sagan, who laid a lot of groundwork for what it was to reach out and bring that frontier of science to the public. We have a long way to go.
Isaac is calling from Sanford, North Carolina. Isaac, what do you think about the government's role in science?
I believe that you should most definitely fund science because it's necessary. I was doing research in artificial intelligence at HBCU, and it got stopped. And my lead professor put his foot down and basically said, no, we're not going to go with this. And he got most of the research funding reinstated, I think like 80% of it. But without that, we don't go forward. So,
yeah.
So you had to stop it temporarily.
Yeah, it's like a couple of projects got stopped, or the ones that could go forward, they went forward, but the ones that still needed more money, they didn't go with those anymore.
Yeah, and you're directly affected by this, and so you're a voice that is a firsthand account. So what we need are people who are not, whose funding was not cut because they don't get any funding at all because they're not scientists, still understand the importance of this. It can't just be scientists, begging for money, because it is in the national interest that the country does science, and everybody needs to know and be behind that.
Yeah. Let's get to another one. Eric is in Houston. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, great. Thanks for taking my call. I guess my opinion is a little bit different from those that have been talking previously, but I think that there should be a wall between science when it comes to science driven by government and science driven by industry. I think industry plays a huge role in the direction that science takes in government. And I guess when I say government, I'm talking about our institutions, our educational institutions for the most part. Three things have shaped that opinion of mine over the last few years. One was the COVID vaccine and the CDC's response in implementing it. My family and I had previously gotten COVID, recovered from it, and I'm looking to see something educated coming out from the CDC. And what do I see? What they tell me about, the immunity that I acquired. They told me that I still needed to go get a shot, and that works against decades and decades of precedents that the CDC had previously. And I lost a lot of respect for them because billions of dollars goes into the CDC. That is an enormous organization. And for them to just come out and say, oh, well, go get the shot. That told me that they spent no time in researching, despite the billions and despite all the people in their organization. They spent no time thinking about, well, what kind of immunity does COVID impart on those that have gone through it.
Okay,
And
so Eric, let's let Neil deGrasse Tyson in here to respond to what you're saying. Thank you so much for the call.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. For example, there was a rate at which COVID was mutating in the population, and to the extent to which it mutates into a slightly different variant of itself will affect the potency of your either naturally acquired immunity from having obtained, from having had COVID, or from any previous vaccine. That's why there have been multiple vaccines over the years. When we tracked, there was the Omega variant of COVID and some other Greek letters in there as well. And we were able to track where it came from, where it started. So I think people, and it's not anyone's fault, because no one is trained to think about science this way. And the CDC, I think, could have done a better job communicating what was going on and why. But when you have a novel virus and you don't have decades of prior data on how the thing behaves, then you want to be cautious about it. And lest you catch it again and die and say, how come you didn't tell me to take the vaccine? So this is the balancing act that occurs on that moving frontier. Right. But I think it could have been alleviated by wiser communication between the agencies and the public. And I knew that while it was happening. This is not just hindsight, because I communicate science. It's what I do. So I was disappointed in what I saw as that unfolded.
Yeah. Tolliver, do you think it's time for the fun questions now?
Yeah, I gotta
I'd say so. I'd say so. Okay. Frank is calling in from Boston. Frank, go ahead with a fun question.
Hey. Whoa, yeah, yes, sir. Nicholas Tesla. He had an instance where he was experimenting on something, and he said that during that experiment, he was contacted, or he heard voices coming from outer space. Has anybody tried to recreate and exactly find out what he was doing, and that maybe he wasn't crazy?
Okay. So either he was hearing voices.
You wanted a good one, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. No,
that's a couple of things. So either he was hearing voices just in his own head and thought they were from outer space. This has happened many times in the history of our species, and there are people in the street who are having conversations without even earplugs in, who are having conversations with you don't know who, voices in their head. Or aliens were talking to him, okay? That's what I'm confronted with here. So we all want the alien. We love the aliens. But at some point, you have to say, what is the more likely explanation for what's happening here? Now, Tesla, by the way, he's got a huge fan base to this day, because some think he was wronged. People think that, that he was suppressed or whatever. I want you to know he's fully known and honored in the field of physics. There's even a unit of magnetic field density named after him. It's called the Tesla. Okay. So he's not unrecognized in our field, but we had to cherry pick what he did that was helpful and useful versus the more fringy things that he experimented with. And I'll take nothing against him on his fringy work. It takes a little bit of that to do the real stuff. Back at,
well,
you need a little bit of crazy to do something that no one has done before.
I've always
said. We're all fans of Tesla.
I wonder what he would think though of the bumper stickers now that say "My Tesla identifies as a Prius." Let's go to
the man predates the car. Yes,
that's right. Yeah. Claire is calling in from Madison, Wisconsin. Claire, what do you think?
Hi, Jeremy. I'd like to ask Dr. Tyson. I know two people that honestly believe the Earth is flat. What would Dr. Tyson say to them to convince them?
So thank you for that. And we live in a free country, and you can think, believe, and say what you want, provided it doesn't harm others. And so there are plenty of jobs for you if you think the world is flat. Okay, where knowledge that Earth is round won't matter to your earning capabilities. Kyrie Irving, an NBA basketball player, like a basketball player. I last remember he was in Celtics, got traded a couple of times. He was a big supporter of flat Earth. Well, basketball courts are flat. So a round Earth will have no consequence to his earning potential. I don't chase down such people. Part of me thinks it's a conspiracy so that they all get sent into space first without having to pay for it because it's so annoying. We'll get them to see Earth firsthand as a sphere, and then they come back, okay, now I believe you, and they got a free ride for having done so. But yeah, I can't, there's a limit to how much time I can spend arguing with them in a free country. Let them keep thinking it.
By the way, Jeff Bezos of Amazon recently said he thinks there will be millions of people living in space in the next couple decades. Do you agree with that?
Not in the least. Not in the least. There has to be motivation to do that. And space is so hostile to human physiology that to say, let's ship 1 million people there in any amount of time, it's just not, I don't see that. By the way, in 1985, there was a prediction in the year 2000, 50,000 people will be living and working in space. That was the prediction in 1985, all right? And you know how many people were living and working in space in the year 2000? 3 on board the space station. So the dream, I don't mind dream states. Go ahead, dream it. But at some point, there's a reality check on these expectations. And so I don't see that happening because the motivation to do so, other than we're explorers and we're discoverers and it's the next thing to do, somebody's got to write the check. And he could probably do it, Bezos, but it would be like a vanity project. It wouldn't be some native state of humanity going into the future.
Nathan is calling from Berea, Kentucky. Nathan, go ahead for Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hi, Dr. Tyson. You were mentioned in Kelly and Zach Weinersmith's new book, A City on Mars, as being a proponent for settling space to decrease the existential risk of humanity being wiped out. And they said it would be more likely to bring about war on Earth than the cooperation we've seen on like the ISS or Mir. How do you think about what living off-world would bring for us on Earth if it were lots and lots of people?
Great question. So first, thanks for telling me that. I didn't know I was in the novel, A. B, my views are the opposite of that. So the notion that we should be a multi-planet species to reduce the existential risk of a killer virus or an asteroid or climate change or whatever, that makes a good headline. Carl Sagan was a big fan of that. Elon Musk wants half of us to be on Mars for that, to mitigate that risk. All I'm saying is, but I want to be a multi-planet species as well, but not for that reason. It would be fun to be able to just visit Mars, but I want to come back. It'd be fun to visit Mars or terraform Mars and go and hang out there. I don't have a problem with that, but I would do it because that's cool, not because we will split the species so that think about it. Whatever it takes, you know what kind of geoengineering it takes to terraform Mars? Think about it. Whatever it takes to terraform Mars, ship 1 million people there, it's got to be easier to deflect the asteroid that's headed towards Earth. That's all I'm saying here. Okay? Whatever it takes to terraform Mars and ship 1 million people, okay, it's got to be easier to find the super serum to cure any virus that arises, okay, in the medical community, given what that investment would be. So I don't see it as a thing to save the species. And even so, even if you did have 2 species and an asteroid were coming, you're just going to let a whole half the species die? Really? No, you're going to try to stop it. So it makes good bar talk, and it's clickbait, but I don't see it. Now, in terms of peace on Earth, there are treaties about our conduct in space. There's the original Outer Space Treaty in 1967. There's the Artemis Accord that is American, and China didn't sign it, by the way. They have their own treaty that they have with Russia and Venezuela and other sort of like-minded national interests. But in that accord, it says, we're all going to go into space and live peacefully and share data and all be friends, okay? And so I say to myself, if we can be friends in space, then be friends here on Earth.
We should be able to be friends on Earth. A perfect note to end the hour on. Neil deGrasse Tyson. We have to leave it there. That's astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. His just about to be released book is called Just Visiting This Planet, Revised and Updated for the 21st Century. Such a great pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for all that interest in your supporters out there. It's great.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. We've got extra episodes every week available on the Middle podcast feed. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Supreme Court and whether you trust it as it makes very important decisions for the country.
You can reach us at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. You can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter.
And just want to make a note this hour of the passing of an icon in public radio, an incredible talent without whom we probably would not be here right now, a founding mother of NPR, Susan Stamberg, who has died at the age of 87. She showed all of us in public radio how to do great radio by being the human beings that we are. I am Jeremy Hobson, and I will talk to you next week.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast.
Guaranteed Human.